Hello everyone, Andrew here. Today we're diving into macros for Query Builder in JetEngine. This is something you've been asking for, a super detailed overview, and I'll make sure to cover all the most practical use cases. By the end, you'll know exactly how to use macros to power up your dynamic queries. And don't forget, we also have a full written guide, the link is right here in the description. So first, what exactly is a macro in JetEngine? Think of a macro as a smart variable. It's just a piece of text, but when JetEngine sees it in the field where it expects information about what data to retrieve, it automatically replaces that text with the correct value depending on the context. For example, current ID will be replaced with the ID of the current post. If I'm on a single post page, it automatically pulls that post ID. Let me show you the process we'll repeat for many macros later. I'll create a post query. The choice of query type always depends on what you want to retrieve. In this case, posts. In the General tab, I select my post type. Then in the post and page settings, I enter a specific ID into the post in field and save the query. Next, I need a listing for that post type. I'll make a simple one, just one dynamic field, let's say the doctor's name. Now on the single doctor's page template, I'll insert a listing grid widget sourcing doctors. At first it will show many doctors' names, one piece of info per post. But then I apply the custom query I just created. Now, if I check different doctors' pages on the front end, the listing grid shows the same doctor's name everywhere, because the query is locked to that single post ID I typed earlier. Here's where macros step in. Back in the query settings, instead of typing a fixed ID, I insert the current ID macro. In JetEngine, we don't manually type current ID with % signs. Instead, there's a little token stack icon to the right of the field. Click that, pick current ID, and you're safe from typos. That icon is your sign that macros are supported in that field. Now when I preview different doctors' posts, the listing grid changes dynamically. It shows the right doctor's name depending on the current page. That's what macros do. They make queries dynamic and context-aware. That example actually covers the first use case, using the current ID macro in the post in field to show only the current post. But let's be honest, this isn't something you'll use a lot, because the single post template already shows that post data without extra queries. Where it gets really useful is when you flip it around. Put the current ID macro in the post not in field, and you instantly exclude the current post from your query. That way, on a doctor's page, I can show a listing of other doctors without repeating the one we're already looking at. This is much more practical. Next case is showing items that belong to the taxonomy term of the archive page we're currently viewing. If you're dealing with posts, I'll go into the text query settings, select the taxonomy we're focusing on, and set the field to term ID. That's because we're comparing the ID of the currently viewed term to the IDs of items in that taxonomy. Then, in the terms field, I'll pick the queried term macro. Now, on the archive page for that term, the query will only return posts connected to it. In a simple archive situation, you'd actually get the same behavior if you just turn on the Use as Archive template toggle in the listing grid. But using the query term macro gives you more flexibility. For example, you can add extra filtering on top of the taxonomy, or if multiple post types share the same taxonomy, you can choose exactly which ones to display. Now let's look at the scenario where we're on a single post page and want to show related posts that share the same terms. For this, we use the current terms macro. It returns the IDs of all terms assigned to the current post, which we can compare against terms on other posts. Here's the setup. In the Queries Text Query tab, choose the taxonomy you want to match, set field to term ID, and in Terms select Current Terms, and make sure you've specified the same taxonomy after that. Then set the compare operator to in. Once this custom query is applied to a listing grid on a single post template, you'll see items that share terms in specified taxonomy with the current post. If the current post has no terms, JetEngine's default behavior is to return all posts, which you usually don't want. To prevent that, open the macro's advanced settings and set a fallback to a non-existent term ID, so the query shows nothing instead of everything. Fallbacks aren't just for terms, they can help in other cases too, like empty meta fields or data stores. But sometimes the default show all behavior is exactly what you want, if you'd rather display general items instead of leaving the grid empty. Now let's see how, with the help of a macro in Query Builder, we can show only a specific content type that matches a visitor's search query through the default WordPress search. In a new post query, I'll choose the post type I want to display. Then, in the search keyword field, I'll select the query variable macro and type S as the variable name. That's the special URL WordPress variable that stores whatever the visitor typed in the search box. By default, WordPress search works broadly. On the standard search archive page, it can show all kinds of content, posts, pages, any custom post types, basically anything that contains the search terms in title, content, or excerpt. But if I create my own search results template with the listing grid that uses the custom query I just built, then the visitor will only see the specific post type I've defined in that query. So this macro essentially connects WordPress's search with the advantages of JetEngine's queries. And if you look at the search archive URL, you'll notice the S variable in it. That's the same variable we applied when creating the query. To display other items with the same meta field value, we use the current meta value macro. I'll start creating a query just like in the previous use cases. Then I go to the Meta Query tab and add a new clause. For the field key, I'll select the JetEngine Meta Field macro, which directs where in the post the query will look for the match. From the dropdown, I choose the field with the data we're interested in this case a select field with yes and no options that tells us whether the property has a garage. In the compare operator, I'll set the value to equals. And for the value, I'll insert the current meta value macro, again pointing it to the garage field. One more step. To avoid showing the current property again, I'll go to the post and page settings and add the current ID macro to post not in. Now when we display this query in a listing grid on the single property page, visitors will see other properties with the same garage status as the one they're viewing, because JetEngine matches the value from the current post meta field to the others. By the way, if you're finding this tutorial useful so far, don't forget to give it a like and drop a comment. It really helps us to know which use cases you want discussed more. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next Crock-a-Block deep dive. Sometimes, instead of automatically pulling related content, you want to manually select which post to show. For that, JetEngine has the post meta field and a special macro to display those selections on the front end. So when we have the post field with the related posts ready, let's create a post query, specify the post type and go to the post and page tab. And in the post field, I insert the current meta value as string macro and then specify the post meta field name I created. This macro converts the stored array of selected post IDs into a string, so the query understands it. Now when I place this query on a listing grid in the single property template, visitors will see exactly the posts that were manually chosen in that field. This is great if you want editorial control. For example, handpicking which related articles or recommended properties to show instead of relying on automated relations. If we need to show each user the post they've created on their account page, we'll need the current user ID macro. First, create a new post query and in the General tab select the post type to display. Then go to the Author tab and for the Author ID choose the current user ID macro. This macro returns the ID of the logged in user, so the query will only fetch posts created by that person. Now apply this query to a listing grid on the account page and each user will see their own post listed there. If we want to show the post created by the user whose profile we're currently viewing, we'll need the Queried User ID macro. Create a query just like in the previous use case and in the Author tab for Author ID choose the Queried User ID macro. This macro returns the ID of the user whose profile page we're on, so the query will fetch the post authored by that person. Now apply this query to a listing grid on the public profile template and each profile will display the post of its author regardless of who's viewing the page. To show the author of the post we're currently viewing, create a user query. In the Include Exclude tab, in the Include field, choose the post author ID macro. This macro returns the ID of the user who authored the post. To apply this query, you'll need a user listing template. Place a listing grid on a single post template connected to that listing and activate the query. Now the author's information will be displayed for each post. This works well for blogs, directories, or review sites where showing the author's profile, picture, bio, or even contact links helps give credibility and adds navigation options. To show the taxonomy terms attached to the post we're viewing, we can create a terms query. In the General tab, choose the taxonomy and in the Object Post IDs field, select the current ID macro so the JetEngine knows to fetch the terms of the current post. Apply this query to a listing grid with a term listing template and it will display the terms connected to each post. This goes further than the simple dynamic terms widget because we can design a full listing for terms, control their layout, or even add filtering and ordering if needed. For example, on a category page, you could display features, neighborhoods, or property types styled with images instead of just plain text. To show the post a user has saved to a data store, we use the getStore macro. Create a new post query and in the General tab, select the post type that should be displayed. Then go to the Post and Page tab and in the Post In field, choose Get Store and select the data store you want to use. Now place a listing grid with your post listing template on the page, apply this query, and each user will see the post they've added to that data store. And just to note, added to data store is a broad term. This setup works not only for favorites, but also for things like recently viewed or liked posts, as we explained in one of the previous tutorials. To show the users who liked or saved the post you're currently viewing, we use the Get Users from Store Item macro. Create a new users query and in the Include Exclude tab, in the Include field, choose Get Users from Store Item. In the pop-up, select the data store you want to use and set the context to post. Now place a listing grid with a user listing template on the single post page. Apply this query, and it will display the users who added that post to the data store. And that's our deep dive into macros for Query Builder. We went through 12 practical use cases, sometimes using the same macro in different ways, sometimes combining macros together. But remember, these are just examples. Macros are flexible tools you can adapt to almost any dynamic setup. The full written guide is linked in the description. And if this video helped you, give it a like, leave a comment with the use cases you'd like us to explore further, and subscribe for more CrocoBlock tutorials. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.